Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 71. England took on Scotland in the Calcutta Cup at Murrayfield on Saturday, and we're here to discuss what happened. You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that still believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Hi guys, welcome to our very belated England against Scotland, Scotland against England match roundup episode. As you may have noticed, we didn't do the usual pre, during and post, which is probably just as well. Lots to discuss. Dan, what are your thoughts?
I hate rugby. It's mate, it was bound to happen at some point. So I think overall today we're going to come up with, I don't know, reasons why it happened, excuses. But I think the first thing that I just want to say is the better team won. Scotland 100% deserved it. We can't take that away from them. And they won because they outplayed us on the day. And they were the better team on the day.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, not buying into all of the chat that's going about saying that it was because of bad refereeing. We can talk about the refereeing a little bit later on, but ultimately England didn't perform, and the stats speak for themselves. I mean, it was 25-13 to England. I'm sure I don't need to tell anyone that, but there you go.
25-13 to Scotland.
To Scotland even. Yeah. How depressing. How unfortunate that we decided to do our joint episode with the Thistle guys just before this one.
I messaged Matt actually after the match saying congratulations, completely deserved, and he came back with a very gracious message. In fairness, I think if it probably been one of us would have gone back like, "Ha ha, we're better than you," but he came back with a very gracious message saying,
England are always going to get abuse for losing it against anyone, but in a game like that, Calcutta match. It's inevitable, isn't it? But okay.
No, he came back saying, thanks for messaging me. That's good of you. Like he didn't at all rub it in.
Good. But like you say, it would have been difficult the other way around. He'd have been well within his rights to rub it in.
He would have been well within his rights, but he didn't. It was, I mean, there is a lot to talk about, and there's a lot to say what happened. But Scotland were brilliant. Scotland actually were brilliant. They played some good rugby. They scored some good tries. Hugh Jones was just phenomenal, as was Finn Russell. And they showed they've got some world-class players and they can cause damage on their day.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're the England Rugby Pod. We're here to back England no matter what. So, putting on my slightly biased mask for a minute. Scott, he had a great game. Some moments of individual brilliance. Finn Russell, he's an interesting one because I think it was Hugo Monnier that said, he's a maverick, and by which he means he can win you a game or he can lose you a game. And to be fair, you look at that. I don't know if it was the first Scotland try or the second one, but that long pass that Finn threw. That could have gone either way. It was sort of hanging in the air, and you kind of were thinking, "What's going to happen here?" It was quite fortunate. England, for me, England, and this is not to take anything away from Scotland because they were the better side without question. But I think England made them look better than they were, and that's not a popular thing to say if you're Scottish and listening. You're probably not, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when Scotland goes to Ireland.
Well, this is it, and this is all the chat at the moment. So Scotland can produce these performances, can be world-class, but to be an actual genuine top team, you need to be a top team both home and away.
I mean,
and that's where Scotland are missing out. They haven't been the top team away yet.
But like Eddie Jones said last year when we were heading down to Millennium Principality, whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, it's a rugby pitch. Same size. It doesn't. Obviously, there's an advantage of having your home support there, but in terms of executing a game plan, it doesn't make any difference.
Mate, we both know that's not real, though, don't we? You look at everyone's sort of home and away performances. it is a huge difference being at home, not having just every aspect of the game, like not having that travel, waking up in an environment well, having that motivation of the home fan.
Well, let's turn to the stats for a minute then, because despite what and this may surprise some people, it certainly surprised me. England had more possession, 56%. England had more territory, 57%. Both of those stats, to me, I'm amazed by, because watching the game, it felt like England were never in it.
England seemed very static to me. So more possession, more territory. Well, I think one of the things that we sort of realise at the moment is actually that's not as relevant these days. It certainly doesn't seem to be.
100% with their scrum, 100% with their line out, England.
Yeah, but what did they do with it? They did seem very static.
Oh, I mean, to me, it felt like they did what Scotland did against Wales. They kind of turned up thinking, this is as good as guaranteed. That we're just going to come along and all we've got to do is turn up and the result's ours. And it felt like it was a completely different. They showed Italy more respect.
I think so. Do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of England maybe, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago, where there'd be lots of possession, pass out. And there were times when I saw people like in the back line receiving the ball, literally just standing still and then trying to make a run, or just... I was very surprised by the England performance. I think it was a poor performance. The question for me is, look, everyone has a poor performance. That's just the way sport is. That's the way rugby is. But the question we got to ask, is this the start of a bigger, worse thing, or is this just one off? We just brush under the carpet and say, bad day at the office, it happens, onwards and upwards.
I mean, for me, the big thing to come out of this is, what do England have in terms of attacking the breakdown? Because it didn't feel like anyone knew what to do, whether it was defending the breakdown or attacking it. When the ball was on our side, they were it was like schoolboy rugby. They were sort of standing there thinking, well, the ball's on our side, no one's allowed to do anything. And when Scotland had the ball, England just didn't compete. Whereas you roll reversal, and I think England conceded 15 turnovers.
Scotland's counter-attacking was absolutely immense.
And I think, absolutely, I'm not trying to take anything away from their ability to do it, but where England are supposed to be this world-class side, where are the guys doing that for England? Because it didn't appear to happen at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I say, sort of 6-7 years ago, we used to be saying, like, if we only commit 2 for breakdown, that means that we'll have more players out back. But it's the same old. Get the bill first, win that first, and then worry about... I think our game plan was always only ever to commit those players there, assuming that was going to be enough to win a breakdown, not expecting...
I think the thing is, if you're going to do that, then you have to be throwing out rapid, fast ball. You can't commit 2 to the breakdown and then take your time and have a look around and think, what are we going to do? Because you're going to get counter-rucked. The only way that works is if the scrum half is in there just pinging it out, every single time it comes in. So he's the third man in, 2 go in to secure it, third man straight in, ball out, go again. And that didn't happen. So every time there was a breakdown, you could see what was going to happen. It was so frustrating to watch, and it's different to what we've seen from England in the past. I think it's definitely highlighted. I mean, I guess if we're looking at silver linings and what have you, it's definitely highlighted an area that they need to work on, whether that be game plan or actually just getting the individuals to improve in those areas. But 25-13. Look, if England had played the way that they did in the last 10 minutes, right off the bat, we may be talking. It may have been a very different story. But you can't leave it to the last 10 minutes.
No.
And New Zealand, New Zealand will be laughing, having watched that. England are here chatting about number 2 in the world. We want to be number 1 in the world. The big grudge match is England against New Zealand in the autumn. And off the back of that performance, they must be thinking, we got this.
Well, I think the thing we've got to worry for more immediately is Ireland. Well, do you know what? Even before that, France.
Yeah, I mean,
France in Paris.
I actually worry for France. I think we're here moaning about England, but I think England will go away and go right. These are the things we did wrong, and I think they'll come back against France, a very different side. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them put a big score on France, especially at the moment while France don't seem to quite know where they are. Maybe that's wishful thinking. But
it could be.
I could see it because what's interesting, Ireland are now the only side left in who can get the Grand Slam. They're the favourites now, but no, England included, obviously, no side has been particularly good in this Six Nations. Ireland haven't been great. They just beat France. They had a pretty close game, and I know we did too, against Wales, despite absolutely dominating Wales, statistically. It was far too close, and ultimately, Wales were in form, and at the end there, and you wouldn't have put it past them to have taken points, if not for that interception. So it's interesting to hear that everyone going, "Oh, Ireland have got it; it's in the bag." They're the superior side, because you're thinking, actually, no. England were shit, no question, but Ireland haven't been great. Scotland, brilliant against England, but they haven't been great. France obviously have been pretty poor. Wales have been pretty poor. Italy perhaps are the only team that are actually doing what they expected to do.
Consistently shit.
But it seems like all the talk about the Northern Hemisphere and how much better they were, and the Southern Hemisphere are going to be looking at this Six Nations Championship and going, "Yeah, you had a lucky autumn."
So I think the thing that we need to remember, and something that we forget every year, the Six Nations is different.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It is just form genuinely, of course form matters, and form ultimately you do tend to find the best teams end up winning it or whatever. But matches these are the ones where if that match is a friendly, England win every time against Scotland, but because it's Six Nations, because it's the old enemy, because of the history, it does make a difference. I don't know why. It is a psychological thing, sure, but we see it year in, year out, and every year when we go into the Six Nations, being like, oh my God, whatever. Wales are awful at the moment; they won't stand a chance.
Yeah, and they step it up.
Yeah, exactly. Then these teams do stand a chance. So we do need to take that factor into account. The problem is at the moment it's not a real factor. It's not tangible. So you can't sort of say why it is. So everyone's like, oh no, these are the stats, these are the figures. So this is what's going to happen, but it just doesn't. We need to realise that, I think.
How depressing was it? And fair enough, correct call certainly on one of them, but those two tries that obviously, were called back or disallowed. It just felt like England had come out a different side in the second half. They were a different side in that second half. But discipline, we talked about it before the game. Discipline is so important. Obviously, the Courtney Lawes one. Obviously, it wasn't a mistake. He put in a big hit, and it could have been. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't that he made a mistake. Unfortunately, the big hit resulted in the ball coming off him rather than being knocked backwards by the Scots.
Yeah, I don't know the law there, because when that first happened, I thought, oh, that's part of a tackle.
I thought it was a little bit
like a charge down.
Yeah, well, I think it has been that has been the law in the past, but that's obviously been changed. But I kind of think, why? I quite like the fact that it's the one time when you can knock it, or the other time when you can knock it on. Yeah. Puts the onus on big hits and target the ball in a big hit, and I don't know.
Ultimately, it was a shame. It was a shame that one of those tries didn't count purely from a match perspective.
Well, I'm not. The other one, slightly more contentious. I don't necessarily agree. Nigel Owens said to Joe Launch, you know how a lot of referees, and Nigel Owens is very good at it, kind of talking to the players during the game in order to prevent him from having to blow the whistle. Telling them to leave it, telling them to use it, all the rest of it. He kind of screamed at Joe Launchbury to leave the ball because Joe Launchbury was competing for the ball. Joe Launchbury took his hands away from the ball, and obviously as a result, he's already leaning too far forward, so he's not going to be able to support himself with just his legs at that point. So he gets out the way as he's been told to do by the referee. Game continues, and then obviously there's the interception, and then it's called back as a hands on the floor in the ruck penalty.
It's ultimately that is the law, though. Like, there's been a lot of chat about ref decisions.
Well, hang on.
You know how Wales.
Well, hang on. You say ultimately that's the law, but let's say that you're in a ruck and you go to ground, right?
Yeah.
Your hands are allowed on the floor. Then you're not allowed to support your body weight when competing for the ball. That's the law, right? That's the penalties given if you're using the floor to support your body weight in order to try and compete for the ball. But the point here was that Joe Launchbury wasn't competing for the ball anymore because he'd been told to leave it.
But then he's gone over the ball.
Well, but he didn't, though. I mean, for me, that one was contentious. I don't think he went over the ball. I don't think he slowed things down. I think the interception was simply down to a poor pass and good timing from Danny Kerr. And I think it was really unfortunate for England that one wasn't given. That's not to suggest that England deserved to win, because they didn't with the performance that they put in. But it could have changed things significantly. But I thought look, Nigel Owens, in my opinion, didn't get anything wrong, and that's kind of the key thing here. Loads of people, and we're going to talk about it because there are people out there who are pointing the finger at the referee and saying he was inconsistent and what have you. He didn't get anything wrong. I did feel like he wasn't quite as willing to let the game play as he has been in the past. Like it was frustrating at times. You know how kind of close to the letter of the law he was playing it, if you know what I mean.
I think it's very hard for referees these days. Everyone's like, let it flow. Yeah, as soon as they do let it flow, somebody's like, well, that in theory should have been our penalty. The ref made a massive mistake there.
Yeah, true.
I get exactly where you're coming from, mate. But in my mind, the decisions were correct, and Nigel Owens or any of the refs have nothing to answer for. I
mean, he seemed to be getting a lot in his ear during that game. Like he said, my understanding is that the touch judges and the TMO and what have you, they're there to look for foul play. They're there to identify. Are they there to identify offsides? I think they're.
If they spot something, they let the ref know, regardless.
But there were other incidents, particularly around the breakdown, where he clearly couldn't see whatever it was he was calling. So although he got it right, those incidents are not supposed to be reffed by the touch judges, by the TMO.
They not the TMO, but by the touch judges. If the touch judge sees something that Nigel Owens hasn't, they're meant to let him know.
I was under the impression that their primary role was to look for foul play and not to interfere with the general reffing of the game. But yeah, fine. A lot of people suggesting that Scotland were regularly kind of infringing, past the offside line, and I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from, is that he was being told about incidents that were coming from the England side, but perhaps not being told about incidents the other way around. And so rugby's changing a lot. Back lines are stepping off very close to the line, which is ultimately how you become a great team, is to play to the very, very edges of the law. But I don't know. It's just frustrating. I guess just looking for excuses, looking for something to kind of take out of the game.
Exactly. And that's something that worries me a bit these days, because every match it seems to go down to ref decisions and refs this, that. But ultimately, the refs didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't change a thing. I don't think we can look at the ref things at all. I don't think we can say that Scotland were infringing any more than England. The one thing I find interesting, and there was an article today talking about Dan Biggar, and I think it was from Martin Williams, saying that he's on the ref's case all the time, complaining. And actually it's harming Wales.
Yeah.
It's 50-50.
I believe it's one of the things that the referees have been told to kind of crack down on from this Six Nations is actually is the chat. to the referee, and basically ensuring that it's captains only.
But I wonder, I can't. I'm not saying England did do this, but were England in the refs era a bit?
I don't think so. I was watching very closely, and whenever there was kind of a bit of a 50-50, England just seemed to take it and get back their 10 and crack on. I didn't see a lot of moaning from the England players, and Nigel Owens. Let's be honest, Nigel Owens is the kind of referee who, if he was getting chat, he'd have been taking them to one side and giving them a lesson in something, because he likes to do that. And I didn't see any of that. I mean, possibly a little bit in the front row, but I think that's just part of getting inside your opposition's head, isn't it? It's a different beast, the front row.
Of course.
And I guess when you're a world class prop or hooker, you've got Nigel Owens telling you how to play in the scrum. It's possibly frustrating. You're thinking, how many times have you packed down, Nige?
Yeah, well, he certainly knows the laws, though. So.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And ultimately, to be a top side, you have to be able to adapt to the referee, and you have to play to the way the referee is reffing the game. And every referee is going to be slightly different. Some are going to be more, more sort of aggressive about certain elements of the game, whether it's scrummaging, whether it's the breakdown, whether it, whatever it might be, holding on. And I think that's probably where England really let themselves down quite a bit. Was the inability, they may not have moaned about it, but the inability to kind of react to the way he was reffing the game, and in order to take advantage of it.
Yeah, maybe. But anyway, let's not worry about any of the rest stuff, because, like you say, I mean, ultimately we're only using it for an excuse, aren't we? Trying to figure it out a bit.
An excuse, and also to use up some minutes, because we're trying to discuss the game, and I can't think of much more to say other than that England have got a lot of improvement to make.
Well, so I guess that's something I want to chat about a bit. What do England need to do? Do they need to be going into the France game? Are there any changes you'd be looking to make? So team-wise?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think, apart from anything else, in a situation like this, I think you give the guys an opportunity to mend it. I think if you go running straight in and start getting rid of people, that's not the right message to send. So I think the right solution is to stick with the same guys, and they've got 2 weeks to work on things. They will have done huge amounts of analysis on the game, so they'll know exactly where they fell down, and that breakdown is clearly going to be an area they're going to work on. Whether it be that they work on being better at attacking the breakdown and trying to get turnovers, or whether they work on what I think they meant to do, what they should have done on Saturday, which is quicker ball. You can't, as I said, you can't only commit to the breakdown and then take your time. There was one incident, I think, where Joe Launchbury was the only man in. He was kind of standing there waiting for something to happen, and there was a bit of a pause, and the Scots were like, okay, well, if you're just going to stand there, I'm going to come through and just take you off the ball, and boom, turnover. And
I hate it when England do that, and they've done it in the past. Like, it is almost slightly arrogant, like, oh, fine, we've got the ball. This is one of us here. I'm glad Scotland counter-upped us, and I'm glad they did.
But I think we
need to learn that.
It's speed of ball, and I think as well it's about being aware of where the scrum half is. Because if the Danny Kell, whoever it is, isn't in a position to get that ball out quickly, then in that situation, using this example we've just given with Joe Launchbury needs to be picking that ball up.
Yeah,
there isn't a scrum half there to get the ball and get it and ship it quickly. So pick the ball up and go again. If your scrum half's still not there, pick the ball up and go again, and wait. And keep doing that, and you can still only commit minimal men to the breakdown. But until your scrum half, if that's who you're waiting on, is there, you can't just stand around waiting for him to turn up. And that's not pointing the finger at Danny Care, because he may have been at the bottom of another ruck, or it's not necessarily in his control to be there. But that far too often there was this sort of, oh well, I'm not supposed to touch the ball. My job's to come and stand here. And I know
Yeah,
that.
I agree, but there's also a case of where the bloody hell are the other forwards?
Oh, I agree. Well, this is the other kind of issue I have with England in that game was so often breaks would be made, and it felt like you're sort of screaming at the screen, please, someone go with him, because it was people running into 3 or 4 blue shirts with no white shirts around, and you're thinking they've already shown you that they can outruck you. This has got turnover written all over it, and inevitably it'd be another one of the 15 turnovers right there. And you're thinking, well, I don't know what the solution is to that, other than to say, where the hell is everybody else? What are you doing? And so maybe I don't want to say that they need to commit more to the ruck, because they have a game plan, and when it works, it really works.
But I think they do need to commit more to ruck. We got found out there. We don't always need to commit more to ruck, but we need to do enough to win the ball, and we're not doing that.
But this is the point. We're winning the ball. I mean, half the time these issues came from ball was right there. It was at the back of our ruck, waiting to be passed. But there weren't enough people there to defend it. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't about
that
scrapping
was our
for
game
the ball.
plan. That's because the players weren't told. And I heard I had an interview, whatever, where Scotland said they had specifically targeted that. Like, this is what England do. Okay. So even though they've won the ball, we will counter-ruck them. And because the players aren't committing to ruck because they're told not to, because it's already won, they're in a different position. Now what we need to realise is our game plan can't just be going with 1 or 2 people, because that doesn't guarantee us winning the ball.
Yeah. Unless you just got that quicker. It's frustrating. Okay, look, changing the subject slightly then. Little incident in the tunnel before the game. Owen Farrell and...
I still don't know exactly what happened there. Do you have more information on
that? As far as I'm aware, I don't know the details of the ins and the outs. I know that the Six Nations governing body, whoever that might be, is asking for feedback from the teams. Personally, I'm not particularly bothered about it. I think 2 teams fired up for a big game, lot riding on it. Stupidly, narrow tunnel. They sent them in together. Something clearly was said. Owen Farrell reacted, and it was all just pushing and shoving. You've seen far worse, but suddenly they've turned this into this big thing, and there could be sanctions and all this stuff. It's like, oh God, just they had a little bit of pushing and shoving. I quite like it. It showed that these 2 teams were really fired up and ready for this game. It wasn't like there was a massive punch up. It was a bit of pushing and shoving and holding people back. It was a private school fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those. Like you're saying, like narrow tunnels, 2 teams in there. I mean, that's happened for years and years when that's happened.
But these things happen. I'm not sure that I'm bothered about. Like a big song and dance is being made out of what I think is just passion, kind of slightly over, boiling over, and that's okay. Different story if if it turns into a real nasty incident and someone gets hurt, and but that's not what happened. It was a bit of pushing and shoving. Like, I would just be like, get on with it. It was interesting. Someone said, could I don't know. I think because at the time Owen Farrell was the only one that they knew was involved, so he was the one having the finger pointed at him. But they were saying, can you send someone off before the game even starts? And interestingly, the answer is no, because the referee isn't in charge until the whistle blows at the beginning of the match.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
I do now.
So yeah, there's been a bit of chat in the media about how Nigel Owens, when he puts in his match report, it'll be interesting to see if he includes anything about that, because that could create problems. But by all accounts, that's none of his business, because he wasn't in charge at that point. So it shouldn't come into it, like officially.
It's one of those, whereas I'm with you, like, look, for the sake of the game, who gives a crap? Like, in some ways it makes it interesting, but equally, don't forget, a lot of young kids and things watch rugby. There does need to be a certain sort of decorum. So World Rugby do need to highlight it's wrong, but let's hope they don't go overboard. Even if it's saying, right, this time, slap wrist, if it happens again, we will throw the book at you, but I hope they don't go overboard based upon a bit of pushing and shoving first time round.
I see. Okay. I hear what you're saying, but I just think that's taking things way. It's a physical game. We want these guys fired up, and it's clearly one of the Scots. Owen Farrell's not just going to decide just out of the blue to walk up and give one of them a push. clearly something has been said.
Of course.
Whether he, I think someone said he was walking a little bit too close to the middle of the tunnel. And maybe he did. Maybe he did it just to annoy one of the Scots, and they gave him a shove and pushed them back onto his side, and he turned around and didn't like it and pushed them back. That's the kind of extent of what we're talking about here. We see far worse on the pitch, and the referees go, "Come on, lads." But I think it happened. I think he said, "What was that about?" And they both said, "Oh, I don't know." He goes, "Well, then, what are you doing? Let's get on with it."
Yeah, look, exactly. And no, I agree. Look, it's easy to make a mountain out of a molehill type scenario, but equally, it is such a, the game is so televised, it is so accessible. But teams do need to realise this. And it's not about the sort of fans as a whole. It's about the last thing you want is suddenly, younger generations before matches trying to push and shove their opponents. So
no, that's what I want.
fair enough. And you know what? I'd quite like to see that anyway.
Exactly. That'd be a whole sport all to itself.
But that's where they're coming from. But
the under eights.
What, just a massive ruck before the game.
Exactly.
But look, if anything serious is done, it is just a bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
With any luck, they'll just be like, guys, come on, stop acting like idiots. You can't do that.
To be honest, I would like to have seen more of the England players doing it, because it turns out that Owen Farrell was the only guy who seemed to be really up for that game.
Yeah.
He played well. But unfortunately, one man can only do so much. He was England's best player by a mile. So maybe a few more of them just needed a bit more fire in their bellies.
England need to get beasted this week.
I think they're going to do some damage on 2 weeks. In 2 weeks against France, I think they're going to do some damage in Paris. I'm assuming it's in Paris, and I think it's going to set things up for a pretty interesting final weekend, particularly if, and I think Ireland will beat Scotland, but particularly if that ends up being a close game, which it could be. I think that will make for a really interesting last weekend. And I could still see England doing it. I could still see England getting winning the Six Nations. And in some ways, it's obviously we would have liked to have been, going for the Grand Slam. But in some ways, it's if it's a realistic opportunity, they need to beat Ireland by a certain amount in order to secure it. It'll be quite good because it makes it more like knockout rugby. There's nothing worse than like last year where we lost but still won.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I'm annoyed about what happened, but I'm certainly not writing them off just yet. And this is going back to your question of would you make changes? And I wouldn't. I think you have to give these guys an opportunity. Obviously, training over the next 2 weeks is going to highlight a few things. It was interesting that that one of the early changes that he made was taking Brown off in order to bring Jack Noel on, who incidentally was one of England's most effective players, despite only having 25 minutes or whatever on the pitch.
Yeah,
statistically. So maybe he'll look to do something there. I don't think he will. I think he'll stick with his tried and tested. And I guess the only other thing is, were England's issues at the breakdown, and I'm not talking about only committing two players, and I'm talking about competing when the ball's on the other side. Do we lack guys, the kind of the specialists to do that?
No, we don't. I don't believe that, because I had this chat on Saturday and thinking they put a lot of time and effort to do it. It's just they weren't there to do it. If you actually watch England at the breakdown, they have got guys who are very good at clearing out and securing that ball.
No. I'm not. No. So I'm saying not when the ball is England's. I'm talking about when the ball is in last weekend's example, Scotland's. The way that Scotland cleared England out in order to turn the ball over. Do we have the guys to go in and do that and steal the ball from Scotland?
Yeah, I think we do. It's just we don't. That's not part of our game plan. We don't try and do that. But the reason we don't try and do that is because other teams tend to commit enough to the ruck to enable us to be like, it's not worth it. If you've only got one at the ruck, it's like, fine, we can have a go. If you've got 3 or 4, it's very easy for them to hold their own.
Mm.
But one question I wanted to ask you is, did England look a bit tired to you?
They at times, but I would say more like in the middle of the game, because I thought that by the end they were firing again.
Yeah, and that's a bit adrenaline sort of chasing the game. But
But therefore, I don't. I mean, Eddie has said he thinks he can get 20% more fitness out of these guys.
and that's all very well, but equally during the match, I mean, like this whole scrummaging thing with Georgia, I like the sound of it, but every other team, had just a bit more time off. They weren't training as intensely. Is there an argument that, do you know what, maybe England do need that bit of downtime, that bit of time to rest, relax, and be ready for the next match rather than having 2 weeks off and just training your arse off for 2 weeks?
Maybe there's an argument to say that. I think we have to stick by Eddie Jones and say, look, he knows what he's doing. He's done it before. He's notoriously tough, but it's how he gets results. And despite this loss, it's only 2 losses in his entire England career.
That is a massively key point as well, isn't it?
It's really important to remember. Yeah, what are we now? 20. So he's won 23 out of 25, or 25 out of 27.
24 out of 26, mate. Nice try.
24 out of 26. He's won.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's important to remember that. England have had a few. They had a bit of an eye opener on Saturday, and it's given some things to work on. It would have been nice for them to have identified those things, but managed to, do what they've notoriously do, which is kind of grind out a win. Didn't happen, but you learn from it, and better to do it now with 18 months to go than to do it, in the Six Nations next year with only 6 months to go, because there's plenty of time now to. It's not 18. 18 months. So I think they'll bounce back. I have no doubt. I think we'll see them bounce back during the Six Nations, and I think a couple of weeks of Scotland revelling in that victory, well deserved, as you say, and I think talk will turn back to whether England can rectify the situation, and I hope they can. I hothey do put a decent score on France, and it sets things up for an interesting final weekend. Because it would be a shame to go into that final weekend with it being, it's a Super Saturday, all 3 games on the one day. It would be a shame if there wasn't something in it for everyone, because it's nothing worse than going to those and there's just nothing to gain from it. So I hope there's a very close game, Ireland-Scotland, for obvious reasons. Obviously hoping Scotland win, but I hope that's a close game anyway, so there's no massive points difference. And assuming that Ireland do just nab it, I hope England put a decent score on France. Hope maybe take a bonus point and level things up a bit, or at least get it to the point where a win without it having to be by a cricket score makes the title possible, and all to play for.
Let's hope so. I mean, we want it to be exciting last weekend. I think we can leave it with just saying, look, well done, Scotland. Great result, deserved it, played well. England, yes, there's work to be done, but like you say, everyone has a habit of overstating these things. Eddie Jones is still 24 out of 26.
Yeah, and
it's not time to call in mass changes just yet.
No, absolutely not. Don Armand.
We could use him.
Look, most importantly of all, Scotland, enjoy the Calcutta Cup. Look after it for us, because we'll have it back next year.
Oh, yeah.
Guys, thanks for listening. I'm sure we didn't cover half of what you probably wanted to hear about. Get in touch with us on Twitter at England Rugby Pod and let us know if there are things you would rather have heard or other things you'd like us to discuss perhaps in our next episode, because we've obviously got a couple of weeks, so there will be another episode before the next England game. Sorry that England couldn't secure yet another victory, but onwards and upwards, as they say. So join us again. Keep listening, spread the love, rate us, review us, and all that jazz. And we will catch you this time next week, I think.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot for listening, guys.